All right, so welcome everybody. So glad you can make it. This is the Q&A on Dynasty Trust with Christopher Small, and I just want to introduce Christopher here. He has been practicing law for 17 years. He's originally from Kansas. He now lives in Kirkland, Washington. He's the owner of CMS Law Firm, an estate planning and probate law firm. He loves helping people protect themselves, their family, and he also loves to provide opportunity for the future. And I just want to just give you a little background on um, how I came across his information. I was actually on his YouTube channel doing research for Dynasty Trust because there was an overwhelming response for the information. Um, because I mean, I just heard about what a dynasty trust is, and I know that there is a interest for, when you build your portfolio and you want to see it pass through the generations. There's a way to do it, right? We want our descendants and our heirs to be responsible with it. We want to make sure that it's a multi-generational portfolio instead of, working so hard for this portfolio and then the next generation wipes it out. So that's kind of what made me look into this a little more. And he had a video about Dynasty Trust, which was very, very interesting. So just want to go ahead, and this is just a general conversation. And what we'll do is once he's done with the general presentation about Dynasty Trust, then we'll open up for Q&A. And if you can either type your question into the chat, and my lovely assistant Jessica will track our questions. And if you also just want to raise your hand, you can do that too, but we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. So with that, I would like to go ahead and turn the mic over to Christopher Small and take it away.
All right. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Maybe if somebody can just confirm that that's the case, just to make sure. All right, perfect. So also, I'm happy to turn my video on too, if you guys want to do that. I don't know how you guys, operate when you do these things, but I'm totally happy to do that where you guys can see me. I got my suit on today, so I'm feeling good. But yeah, so Dynasty Trust, Suzette asked me to come and talk, and I'm happy to do that. I make a tremendous number of videos, so if you want to see them, you can check out my YouTube channel. I'm putting new stuff up there pretty much every day. I didn't prepare a lot of things to talk about for today. I just figured I would kind of give some background information, and you guys can pepper me with questions. Quite honestly, you can ask me about anything you want related to estate planning. I know the focus here today is dynastic trusts, but I think hopefully what you'll see is that there's more work that really goes into thinking about how you want to create a scenario where things continue on over time the way that you want, more so than sort of the legal work that goes into creating these type of trusts. To give you just a little bit of background, dynastic trusts or dynasty trusts are really just trusts that are designed to never end. One of the main ways that they are designed to never end is they don't have any conditions that allow for distributions to happen without some discretionary event happening, right? So, for example, I'll tell you, I have a trust for my kids, and the way that trust is set up is until they turn 25, there are distributions allowed for health, support, education, and maintenance on a discretionary basis, right? So if I'm dead, if they need something, they would go to the trustee and they would ask for it. If it fell into one of those categories, then those assets would be utilized for those things. If they went to college, if they, I don't know, had some sort of a health thing going on. Support and maintenance really also, really all they're talking about is to keep your lifestyle at the level that it was when whoever the benefactor was around for the most part. Okay. Until they turn 25, those distributions are only allowed on a discretionary basis. So they have to ask the trustee, and then the trustee will either allow for that or not if it meets those definitions. For me, when my kids turn 25, I have it set up so that a third is available to them for if they just ask for it. So they don't have to have a specific reason. It sits in the trust because by that time, this trust that I create when I die will become irrevocable, which means it has a high level of asset protection for my kids. So I want to leave those assets in the trust to be sort of protected by the trust. Unless they want to use them for something, then they can just ask. So a third at 25, a third at 30, and a third at 35. Okay. The reason I do this and front load these is because those are going to be the times in your life when you typically need assets the most, right? I'm 41 right now, I'm 42. If my parents just gave me some money, I would say, great, but I already have money. You know, like I already have started my business. I've already done a lot of the things that I want to do and can continue to do those. Having some extra capital wouldn't be terrible, but you know, I've sort of passed that time when I really could have used it to sort of start and create something when I had little capital, when you could do a lot, buy a house, start a business, do many different things. With a dynasty trust, you never have those structured sort of settlements or structured distribution at 25, 30, 35. It's only discretionary and it's forever. And you would just roll that down from generation to generation. You used to not be able to do that. It was very difficult to do that because the rules on trust really forced them to end. That's kind of changed over time, depending on what state you're in. So you can get around that. So to get all lawyery on you for a minute, there's this rule in play. It's called the rule of perpetuities. Okay. The government basically didn't want to allow for this to happen. Dynastic trusts, basically trusts that lasted forever, because once they go into these trusts, they don't get taxed, right? There's no estate. The only tax that would be levied on a dynastic trust would be income tax on income that was generated from the assets that were inside of the trust, right? So if you have an investment property, if it generates income, you're paying tax on that, right? Whether it's in a trust or out. But as time goes by and you die, there's no estate taxes. There's, you know, those type of taxes, they don't come into play with a dynastic trust. So they wanted to create some mechanism to move these assets and get them out into the world. So the rule used to be basically, the rule against perpetuities is the longest that a trust could last is 99 years after the death of the last beneficiary that was alive when you created the trust. That makes sense. So usually about 150 years is about the max that you could get. If you had a grandkid or something when you created the trust that was 10, you get 99 years after they died. Does that make sense? Some states have changed the rules. South Dakota, Alaska, Las Vegas, I think, or Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas is not a state. Nevada allow for this. They just wanted to sort of pull assets. They wanted to pull money into their states, and so they allowed for some of these things. Because for the trust to exist in those states, there has to be a situs. You have to have an office there. Somebody has to be there to sort of create the trust in that jurisdiction. Okay, that is the sort of the broad overview on dynastic trusts. You can create them as an irrevocable trust now that you put assets into. I also do them for clients where they are revocable trusts that just don't have any distribution schedule when they die. So you can do it either way. Kind of depends on what your asset structure looks like and what you're trying to do from a tax perspective. But I will say this: this mechanical stuff is wonderful. I always try to encourage people to create scenarios within their families so that future generations are responsible, have like a core set of values that understand what's going on. Like so if you look at these, I'm going to go on a tangent for a second, but if you ever study like the very wealthy families in America, in particular, over history, there are some that do very well, like the Kennedys, right? The Rockefellers, They still are super duper rich, right? They are still just trucking along. Versus like the Vanderbilts, right? Cornelius Vanderbilt was the richest person in the world for a long time. And when he died, all of his assets, I think in 3 generations, everything was gone. Everything was gone. And the trust structure itself is going to help with that. But if you don't have sort of a core set of values that you teach and sort of pass down from generation to generation, you're going to have difficulty of actually implementing this over a long period of time. So those are the different considerations that you want to think about as you're putting these things together. But that's kind of the gist of the dynastic trust and where I usually start with people. Okay, so if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Again, it can be about this, it can be about anything else. There are state considerations for all of these things, so I'll try to just give you my best general answer and tell you if you're not in Washington State, go talk to an attorney in your state before you go take action, because the rules could be very different. Most of the time, they are just slightly different, but they might be different enough that you just want to make sure you're doing the right thing. Okay? All right.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
So you know how we have we do syndications, and we pool, we form a community or a collaborative, and we go in together, and we pool our resources. How feasible would it be? Like, let's say if like 10 families that are, they get along, they align, everything's great, and they're like, hey, why don't we build $1 billion legacy portfolio, and our families will each get 1/10 of the portfolio. How feasible is that?
Well, have you ever tried to do anything with 10 people before and get them to all agree on something? So that would be the one thing. And then the other thing to consider too is you start with 10, and then let's say you have 2 kids, and then your 2 kids have 2 kids, and your 2 kids have, your 4 kids now have 8 great grandchildren. So your 10-person syndicate can quickly become like hundreds. And so what in that instance, what I would probably do is just keep the families out of it. Just create a corporation, like a structure where you have a CEO, where you have a board of directors, and they are shareholders. Income is spun off to them, but you have someone else that's in charge of like actually running things. That's probably the way that I would do it. The other tricky thing is, if you're going to keep the management of your assets in your family, you have to just hope that somebody comes up in the family that A, wants to do it, but B, is good at it. There's I'm sure you've met a bunch of people that are not great at making decisions with money, even when opportunities are right in front of them, or they just can't pick the right ones, or they have bad timing. It can be all of these things. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, so the reason why I asked is just because I have a friend whose granddaughter was informed by her mom that she doesn't have to work because the family from way back had set up, they had a business, they had a textile company, and it's been supporting like the family for generations now. And I thought, well, why not with real estate? Why not with commercial real estate? Why not with apartments? Because that's a business as well. And I was thinking, well, how cool could it be, like, if we could somehow do whatever they did over here with this family and that allowed my friend's granddaughter to never have to work in her life again, because she's got this. And every time one of the older generations pass, the pot gets bigger for the surviving family members. So that's why I was just kind of wondering, like, what would that look like? And so that's kind of why I wanted to ask you, like, if a group of people are syndicated $1 billion portfolio, and regardless of how many kids they have 110, and that gets divided amongst however many family members there are. That, you know, I
Yeah.
was just wondering to see how that would
Yeah,
be
sure.
structured.
Yeah, but even in your case, I would say the granddaughter's not doing anything. She has probably no insight into the business, has no idea how it's run. It's probably just run by someone, and the trust is the shareholder
Right.
of the business. So it would be a similar situation. I
Yeah.
would just think of the 10 people that go in on the syndicate to be like the founders of the business.
Hmm.
And then you would just want to make sure that you're setting up structures, um, to corporate structures, business structures for management and uh, of those assets to make sure that they operate in the way that you want. Because even with it's tricky, I mean, it will work. You could do it that way. Even with the textile business, you need to have the flexibility to pivot from time to time. You know, with commercial real estate, maybe not so much. I don't own any commercial real estate, but there may be a time when selling a building, for example, would be prudent, and you want to have people that have the expertise to know that it's time to do that and pursue other opportunities, even if they're in the space, but just other opportunities.
Okay.
Does
Well,
that make
that was
sense?
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that answered my question. Does anyone else have a question? You can just go ahead and raise your hand or just unmute. So we've got Jimmy. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Jimmy.
Hey there, let's see. Christopher. Thank you so much, and thanks again, Suzette, for putting this together. My quick question is, if you're building, if you're in multifamily, if you're constantly building, buying and selling assets in multifamily for, let's say, a number of years, and you want to take it to, like, let's say, the public market, like your portfolio, or your group. Does that complicate things anymore when it comes to setting up trusts for each individual? Let's say there's 10 partners in there, or 10 partners in that corporation. Does it get even more complicated when you go to the public markets, or is it kind of the same process procedure, as you mentioned?
Are you talking about like diluting your shares? Are you talking about like when you talk about going to the public market, what do you mean?
Yes, that's what I mean by means of diluting shares, so that you're issuing other new shares to when you go to a public market. What happens to you as far as when you're trying to set up a trust in that sense?
I mean, it would work very much the same way. So the trust could be the owner of your shares of the company,
Uh-huh.
right? And then
Okay.
it depends on what the structure is like. But if you, as the original shareholders, are the voters or like the board and running the place, then you would just decide how do you want to dilute your shares? Do you want to sell let's say you have 10 members, you have 1,000 shares, right? Everybody has 100 shares. Do you want to sell those shares? Do you want to dilute your own ownership interest? Or do you want to issue like Class B type of stock, right? Where you can just make it up and just put it out there and have people buy in. If you're going to go public, I mean, it's going to be very different, I'm sure. That is not something that I do. I'm sort of familiar with the process, but it's not something I do. But it's going to act very much the same way. Also depends on the type of trust that you have. If you have a revocable living trust that you're creating as this dynastic structure, then you as the individual are really in charge of all of your trust assets and would be able to vote your shares and do everything that you wanted while you were alive. Does that make sense? But
Yeah.
even if you were gone,
Mhm.
the way I describe a trust is very much like its own sort of business. The
Mhm.
trustee is the CEO, right? They have a fiduciary responsibility to act on behalf of the shareholders, which are the
Trust.
beneficiaries, and they will just do what they need to do with trust assets to make them grow, to keep them secure. So it would be very similar. I think you would be surprised probably how many public shares of stock are held in trust. That you just
Okay.
don't hear about it. Yeah.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any questions? Go ahead and just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Don't be shy. Does anybody in here have a trust? Does everybody in here have estate planning?
Hi, Chris.
Yeah. Is it San?
Yeah. Hi. Hey, Suzette. Great content. Thank you for sending this out. And Chris, you sound amazing. Thank you for your time. Yeah. To your question, I had been shopping for somebody like you to help set it up. So just get to the short point here. How does it? Can we work with you? Are you taking clients? How does the process work? How much do it cost? How long does it take?
So the answer to all of that is, I have a very lawyerly answer for you, is it depends, right? So the number one thing that I'll say is I'm only licensed in Washington State. So if you are not in Washington State at this point in time, I really can't help you. I do have a very wide network of attorneys that I know. So if you are some other place, I'm happy to sort of give you a couple of people that I trust and respect to start talking to. If you were in Washington State, you can just set up a time to talk with me. I do just consultations. The answer to all of your specific questions, though, really depends on it's sort of a 3-step process for me. I really want to know a little bit about your family. I want to know a little bit about your assets, and then I want to know about your goals as well. So depending on those 3 things, what you may want to do may be very different from someone else in this group that has, different family or different. For example, if you have a blended family, if you have stepchildren and vice versa, the things that you may want to do may be very different from someone that does not, because you have just different things to consider. If you have significant assets, you may want to approach it different than someone that has less significant assets.
Sure.
I guess. Mm-hmm. And the type of those assets too can make a difference.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just make it quick. Yeah. The goal is very simple: to catch up to Suzette. It may be a never-ending goal, but yeah, it's actually been very difficult. My situation is my kids and I are American, but they're a resident of Canada. My ex, legally separated, is Korean passport, but also resident of Canada. We have our assets separated, but still commingle somewhat. And so it's been challenging to find somebody to help us that can deal with those complications. So if you know somebody, please let me know.
Where do you live? What state are you in?
Yeah, and that's also evolving. I recently got rid of my Canadian residency and just finally out of New York, although I'm potentially moving that base to Florida. So hence why I haven't really found anybody that wants to take me on.
Yeah. So what you just said is very simple. You have a lot of complexity. You have a lot of different moving parts because you're going to think about too. It gets tricky too. Canada is tricky because Canada has its own sort of inheritance tax things going on that you need to think about. What I would say though, if you are legally separated but not divorced, what I would focus on first is making sure that you take care of your property and it goes where you want it to go. If you have nothing in place, no plan in place, and you die, everything will go to your spouse. And you may not want it to go there if you're separated, right? So that would probably be the first thing that I would want to do. And my approach to these things is always sort of, let's do step 1 first, and then let's do step 2 second. So in your case, even if you had $50 million, I would say step 1, let's get like the foundational stuff in place so that if you die, yeah, you may have some tax liability, but at least your assets are going to go where you want them to go, and they'll be set up in a way that they get to the right people, and then you can stair step on whatever else you want. I also describe it as like, let's say you have like 100 acres, right? Like what you want to do first is just like you want to build the house that you're going to live in. That's like the foundational stuff. Then you want to put the pool in, and the barn, right? And the horse corral. Those would be like some irrevocable trusts that you might clamp onto the side for tax things. But step one is like will, power of attorney, a revocable trust. Probably going to be the basics that probably I don't know the sort of the makeup of everyone in this room, but my guess is that's probably where everybody would want to start if you haven't already.
Got it. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
So I want to just backtrack a little bit to that question that I had. So let's say we've got 10 founding investors who want to impact multi-generational family members. And let's say they're able to come together, they've got some plan in place so that there is a trustee with the knowledge that a corporation, a multi-generational corporation that can take care of the business when the founding members pass on. We've got a $1 billion portfolio, and 10% gets distributed to the families every year. That's 10 million a year per family. And let's say the structures are in place. You've got the trustee who is administering the fund, distributing the distributions. Okay, the founding members have passed on. That multi-generational company they also inherit the duty of administering the portfolio. So I'm thinking in terms of being able to collaborate in order to impact the financial future of multi-generations. And I'm just trying to reverse engineer what's needed to start that process. Can you speak a little more maybe about how one would, what is the first step in getting that?
Yeah. So I would do
structuring
it.
something.
I guess I probably would structure it differently than what you are proposing. Every person's on their own. You can come together, but everybody has their own stuff going on because you just never know when someone's going to want to get out anyway for whatever reason. It could be a family tragedy, right? It just could be lack of interest. It could be anything, right? Any of those things. So I would set the syndicate up probably like you do now. I don't know if you create an LLC and people buy in. I don't know what kind of corporate structure you create when you do these things. But if you have shareholders, right, and everybody has their interest, that would be the same. And then what I would do is, let's say now you have just your share, right? So what I would do for my share is I would create a trust around that, and it can be dynastic. You can have it be do whatever you want. And then I would appoint a trustee that is going to have the foresight and the experience to know that they don't want to run a $1 billion syndicate, that they would prefer to take, I don't know, 0.5% of that billion and just pay someone else that really knows what they're doing to run it, right? That's what I would do. And then you would and then the income that you derive, the capital asset itself just grows, and then the income that's derived off to that's where I would be siphoning that off to beneficiaries over time. And then you can, the thing is, you typically won't always, if you want to be truly dynastic, you would not distribute that income every year outright. One of the things that I would do is I would take some of that income and I would buy life insurance policies on every single beneficiary under the trust, so that every time someone dies, you get a new shot of capital that can then be invested in other ways. Other appreciating assets, other income generating assets, whatever you want. That makes sense. And then you can do a whole bunch of different stuff. What a lot of people do too is for these generational type of trusts, they won't always give distributions outright. With life insurance, some of the creative things that you can do is you'll generate cash value off of those, right? They will loan money to beneficiaries that is to be paid back over time to the trust. They will also create structures where if you want to start a business, you have to present a business plan. This goes back to like creating systems and sort of implementing your values over time so that these things continue to work. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's very helpful. Thank you. So, and also now I want to go back to what you were just saying. So let's say just an individual investor, we build up a nice size portfolio. We want to send it down, but we want it to survive the generations, right? That's the whole point.
Yep.
And what you were saying about rules and guidelines and things like that, like, are there resources to help think of all the little details on that? Are there anything that would assist?
Yeah, there are. I don't have them. There are a couple of good, I'm looking at my bookshelf. There are a couple of good books that are out there that talk about, that give you some general framework. A big reason that people don't do this, though, is because it is really a build your own type of a structure quite often. But your core values are going to be different than my core values, right? They may not be very different, but they're going to be different enough that if you don't really take the time to cultivate and build out and just give a voice to what that really means and looks like, it's going to be difficult to create this kind of a thing, So the people that do it, they devote a lot of time and effort to putting stuff together that will survive. It's a real investment in time.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about the family members that, like they know they got to get financial education, or maybe they need to know how to manage their money, or just something that encourages them to educate themselves so that the money can be used to,
For sure.
constructively and not just wasted.
That's right. Here's where it gets tricky, though. It's an investment that you individually have to make in your children out throughout the course of your life. Just putting a clause in a trust that you have to go through a financial literacy program. It's like, if there's no discussion about that at the dinner table, right? I always encourage people to bring their kids in on their financial meetings. Hear the questions that are being asked. Learn about the process. Some people are like, "Oh, I don't want them to know how much money I'm going to have." Well, they're going to know when you're dead. Do you want that to be the first time that they think about how and what they would do with these type of assets? Like, I would prefer to educate them and let them know and bring them in and let them ask questions, see what kind of questions I'm asking, if that makes sense. So it gets real tricky because a lot of people think, I'll just put some clauses in a trust and it will be great. But if you don't have again, it goes back to sort of values and like family philosophy. If you're not living what you are preaching inside of your trust, it's just not going to work. People want to put things. I'll give you an example. People want to put things in all the time about, when someone graduates from college, X will happen, right? I'm like, and the fact is, what will happen is they will go to college, they will mess around, right? They'll do nothing. They will get some kind of an easy degree so that they can meet the criteria to get the distribution that's in the trust, instead of encouraging your kids to read, so it's like these, you can do a lot with a trust. It can help to perpetuate and promote your values over time. But if you don't put in the effort to do it while you're alive, it's very, very tricky. That's the difference between the Kennedys and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts, right? Like, if you ever, like, I read books about these families and learn about, because it's just interesting, right? Like the Kennedys, they would have they had the Kennedy compound, but they would go and have like true family meetings. They had like a board of directors. All of the kids were forced to like, present reports about something that they'd done for the year. They would all set goals and then report on them. So it's like these type of structures that you build into your family, they make a big difference,
Cool. So we have Dan and Anna Code. They have a question. Go ahead and mute yourselves, you guys.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. Hi, Suzette. Christopher, thanks.
Yeah.
I guess some of the questions were answered as you were talking, but I guess the two things I came in a bit late, and I guess the first question was when you referred to the Dynasty Trust, is that similar to a revocable? We have a revocable family living trust. Was
Yep.
the Dynasty Trust just a generic way to state that, or is a Dynasty Trust something was a specific trust, I guess? And the second thing is, within that trust, that would you have any recommendations for some clauses? So we already have it set up for a couple of years, but we have an LLC that's a pass-through to the trust to facilitate the real estate investments. So I guess my question was two-part. One, define it, and the second, would you have any recommendations to amend clauses in the trust? Or we also have 3 kids that we're looking for their future,
Yep.
something to safeguard them, or any recommendations of something that we should add into the trust if it's not already there?
Yeah. So, okay, to answer your first question, when we're talking about Dynasty Trust, we're really just talking about a trust that lasts as long as possible, right? So there's no specific distribution clause in the trust where the assets would be poured out to someone specific. Does that make sense? That's
Yeah.
It can be a revocable trust, it can be an irrevocable trust, but we're really just talking about a situation where there are only discretionary distributions, and there are no actual payouts. Like it's very hard or impossible for a beneficiary to withdraw their entire share out of the trust, and it survives for the next generation and for the next generation, right?
Gotcha,
Okay, yep. And then, so your second question, with regards to the LLC, typically your trust is that holds everything. So if you don't have your LLC in your trust, that would be something that I would look at doing first. It will still.
Yeah, that's what we did.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
All right. I just
we
misunderstood.
created the LLC within the trust, so
Okay,
it's a
yep.
pass-through to the trust.
Yeah, and then as far as clauses and updating, what the nice thing about a revocable trust is that it's very easy to update, right? So what I typically suggest that people do is sort of plan. Oh, this is going to be sort of morbid, but plan as if you're going to die relatively soon, and then when you don't, right? Because you have to be just statistically very, very, very unlucky. When you don't, as time goes by, then you get to see how everybody lives, and then you can adjust from there. So like my kids are young. So right now I just have rose-colored glasses, right? They're all going to be upstanding citizens. They're going to be wonderful. But, they may get older and marry somebody that I don't like, or, just be lazy. I don't know, some people are just lazy. But if you see those things, they may have a drug problem, right? I mean, there could be all these different things that can happen just in your life. You don't really get to choose the path for your kids all the time. And so as those things come up, then I can adjust the trust as necessary to sort of protect against some of those things that I think are valuable. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Christopher. Yeah, it did. Yeah, we just, if it was created a couple of years ago, and I guess it's state specific maybe for the law, we were just wondering if there was anything new that you may think to want to revise the clauses in the trust. But I guess that also, you made a good point. We have triplets, so we have to kind of shift. Yeah.
You guys should be just getting something extra just for having triplets. Yeah.
She's got me.
Yeah. But no, there's no. When it comes to revocable trust planning in particular, there are not going to be a lot of changes in the law that are going to affect your revocable trust. You can really do almost anything you want inside of a revocable trust. When it comes
Great.
to irrevocable trust planning, you have to be careful because while things can change, often they don't change that. When changes in laws happen for even for irrevocable trust, it's just people pushing the envelope of the rules and just trying to see what happens. When it comes to irrevocable trust planning, that is where what gets tricky there is it's hard to change them when you create them, right? That's like the definition of irrevocable. Like you cannot revoke it, you can't change it. So when it comes to trust planning for my clients, I really just tell them like, look, just tell me what you want to do and I'll do it. Like I will craft the language. And if you want to do something that I think is like going to have some side effects that you might not have thought of, then we'll talk about that. Because I'm always trying to think of like, if I were some sneaky kid and I just wanted to grab some cash, how would I overcome the language that's in this trust? You know, like the college
Right.
example that I gave. You can just have, there are a lot of things there where, you know, again, I'm going to try not to say this over and over again, but you can only sort of imply or impart your values inside of your trust so much, you know. So,
Fair enough.
yep,
Well, thank you, Christopher.
yep,
That
yep.
was all we had.
It's a good question.
And we got a question from Monica. She asks, does the trustee typically charge their fees on the percentage of assets managed, flat fee, or is it varied?
Yeah, it's usually a combination of both. There's sort of like a flat annual fee that's just for administration, and then there is usually some asset-based fee. It goes down as your assets go up. You know, the one I can't if you, and by the way, you can just there most I typically recommend that people use professional trust companies as opposed to financial institutions with trust companies inside of them. I think they tend to be sort of conflict ridden. You know, it's amazing how many Bank of America trustees only want Bank of America stock in your portfolio, kind of a thing. So, I like to use professional trustees, and I would literally just Google like your state professional trustee, and the companies will pop up. They often publish their fees like right there on their website because it kind of is what it is. Most of them are going to be like depends on what your asset level is, but between 0.5% and 1%, you know, again, going down as your assets go up. The other thing to consider too is a lot of professional trustees don't like to manage real estate. It's another reason to sort of, if you're going to do something big, like a syndicate, or you're going to have substantial assets, to form a company that the trustee can sort of sit on the board of that actually runs your stuff, if that makes sense. So, and that would also just take a very special type of person in and of itself. But hopefully that answers your question. It depends, but most fee schedules are going to be published, and you can call, and they'll typically send you a brochure or send you something. They're not real sneaky about their fees. They just are what they are, and they're pretty sort of consistent across the board. You don't see a lot of difference. But I will say this one other thing when it comes to that. When it comes to fees in general, if you go too low, you expect to get what you pay for. All right, 0.5% in a management fee may seem like a lot if you have significant assets, but think about the responsibility that you want them to have over those assets. So what I would say. Yeah. Carrie, you got something?
Yes, so I wanted to discuss this because it actually happened in our family. There was a trustee who, from the time my father-in-law had hired him until he passed away, was a very different person who actually believed in, you wealthy people have to pay your fair share, right?
Yep.
And as a result, my husband's grandma paid like 55% in death taxes. And there was lots of time to plan. So obviously, he's not a trustee we would have wanted to keep. And
Yep.
Thankfully, we were able to, based on the provisions, move him aside. And he was retiring anyhow, but we didn't want anyone from his firm or anyone else. How do you go about when you're talking about legacy and dynasty, getting a trustee who you feel really good about, and then making provisions for if that person does change kind of the way that they are, and then, you know, how to get a good legacy plan for, you know, the next person who's going to take over.
Yeah. So, I mean, the farther away from you that you go, the harder it's going to get, right? Just because you're not going to have visibility into who that person might be. I will say though that there are certainly trust companies that are very clear and straightforward with what their policies are, what their philosophy is, and how they approach their job. I would probably just do my best to pick one of the companies that matches your similar philosophy. You know, because you're not, you know, was it a trustee company that you used? Or was it a law firm? Do you recall?
It was a law firm.
Yeah, I just personally wouldn't choose a law firm for that
Okay.
because they don't know what they're doing. I don't do trust administration unless the trust. Sometimes people will create trust just to avoid probate that have direct
Yes.
distributions. That's the only time I will do trust administration for a client if they want, because I don't want to. I don't want to have to watch, you know, oversee assets and do those type of things. It's not what I do.
So generally leave it to a professional trustee versus an attorney.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, because you know, I mean, these firms now, the trustee companies, they're built exactly for this. Their number one job is to reduce taxes, to, you know, invest smartly,
Right.
right? I mean, that's all they do all day. They have their own they have their own tax divisions. They have their own accounting divisions often. Depends on what your asset size is on what you're going to get when it comes to like a all-in-one. That's almost like a family office type of setup. But there are definitely companies out there that will do exactly what you want. I think that's probably becoming more the norm than the other way. I don't know if those maybe didn't even exist back in the day, like of your.
That's what I'm kind of wondering too, because my father-in-law was a really sharp guy, but you know, I don't know. Thankfully, like I said, we were able to get it away from him, and you know, we've done well with it on our own in real estate, and I don't think they knew a thing about it.
Yeah, I mean, you can also, you know, there within a trust, you can name like a trust protector, someone that has the ability to sort of peer into what's going on and replace a trustee
Okay.
sometimes if necessary. But again,
Okay.
the farther away that the trust gets from you, you know, like imagine if your grandchildren or your great grandchildren are adults, like who the person is, you're not gonna, they may not have even been alive, you know, when you were alive. So that just makes it a lot more difficult. But that's why I pick a good company with a good philosophy.
Thank
So
you.
I want to, oh, yeah. Okay, so what should one look for in a trust company? Like how does one go in the process of selecting a good trust company? How do we know they're good, and what should we look for in a good trust company?
I think, well, it's going to depend on what you want, right? Is for if you have real estate, one of the things I'd be looking for is, do they handle real estate? That's going to carve off 60% probably. They just won't handle it. And then what I would do is just meet with them, you know, and just don't take your time. The other thing that I would ask too is, can I talk with any of the families that you work for? You know, they may say no, but if people are happy, they may be happy to talk about their experience. It doesn't hurt to ask. You know, it's not like there's attorney-client privilege there, because they're just like a banker, right? There's no privileged relationship. And then I would talk to them. I would say, what do you like and not like about them? You know, like I would ask the same questions of the trustees. You know, it's sort of like a job interview. If I talk to, you know, 10 of your clients, what would they tell me is the best thing they like about you, and what is the worst thing that they like about you, you know, or they don't like about you? What are the complaints that you get? where do you feel like you could improve as a company? You know, just these kind of questions where, you know, you're sort of interviewing them, so they're gonna, hopefully they give you real answers. So you have to sift through what they're saying, you know, and what reality is. But that's probably where I would kind of start. You know, it's tricky because a lot of the relationships won't start until you're gone, right? Or until you're incapacitated, and you know you're not going to know what's going on anyway. So that part is tricky. But the good news is you have time to sort of feel them out too if you pick them, and you know, you can always just change your trust who the trustee is. You know, it's easy to do.
Okay. And then, so if the intention is for the trust to survive multi-generations and we don't want to put too many rules and stuff on it, what is the bare minimum then?
Well, I mean, the bare minimum to survive multiple generations for me would just be to think you want to be aware of the assets that are in the trust and make sure that they continue to generate revenue across multiple generations with the understanding that the class is going to get bigger as time goes on, right? That's probably. I mean, it could, I guess it might not, but if you know, if everybody has 2 kids, then it's going to be big, relatively big. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? The pie is going to stay the same unless you think about how you can increase the pie. So that was one thing I would think about. You're going to just definitely not want to have structured distributions unless without some discretion, right? That's the other thing too. You know, you can create these trusts where you wouldn't necessarily have a scenario where the granddaughter just doesn't ever have to work again. You know, that trust can act as like a safety blanket. It can also ensure that they get the best of what opportunities present themselves, right? So for example, if your great grandchild got into Harvard, you would hate money to be a reason that they didn't go. You know what I'm saying? And so if it's just truly for those discretionary reasons, you can, you know, the assets will continue to grow, but you'll still have that backstop, or some sort of a tragic accident, you know, where medical bills would wipe you out, right? That's where the trust could step in for those kinds of things. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, this was really informative. Did anyone else have any other questions they want to ask? We've got about 5 minutes.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy.
Hit me with your best questions. All I do is answer questions like this all day, so I'm happy to get whatever you guys got.
Yeah, Sanang says thank you.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
welcome.
we really appreciate you taking the time to you know, talk about this, because you know, estate planning is something that I've just recently just really become more interested in now that I'm getting older and stuff, and I'm thinking about my family, and I just want to make sure that whatever you know, I can build for, you know, my family, that there's a way to make sure that those assets are that they can survive the generations, because I know my life was hard growing up not having.
Yep.
Right. So all right, so Guile and Janine, everyone says thanks. Dan and Anna said thanks. Great content, Christopher. Guile and Janine says thanks for the great information and detail. Jimmy, all right, everyone's saying thank you.
Yep.
So yeah,
Happy
thank
to
you
help.
so much for
I like doing this stuff,
taking
so
the time.
yeah, it was fun. Fun. Appreciate you having me on and
Yes.
asking good questions.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, so if no one else has any other questions, then I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up. If you guys have any just general questions and you want to get in contact with Christopher, did you want to type in your email
Yeah.
for everyone, or
Yeah.
I can just forward it? You can just reach out to me and I can send you his
I'll type it
contact
in anyway,
information
just in
too.
case. It's
Okay.
pretty simple.
Well,
Yep.
there it is. So if you look in the chat, you'll get his you'll get his email. And if you're looking at this video on the replay or this yeah, if you're looking at this on the replay, you can just reach out to me, and I'll be happy to forward his information along as well.
Yep. And
Any
if you guys are
questions, so.
if you guys are curious, my YouTube channel has hundreds and hundreds of videos on it. So they're short and they typically answer like a very specific question. So if you're not even sure what you should be asking, that's a decent place to start, because I typically just create videos about the questions that I get asked when I'm doing potential client meetings. So there's quite a bit of stuff on there.
Did you want to type your YouTube channel in the chat so everyone
I don't
can?
know the YouTube. If you go to
That's okay.
yeah, if you just go to
I'll get
YouTube
it.
and
I'll get
type
it
in
for- I'll-
CMS Law
I'll pass
Firm,
it.
it will show up. I'm the only
Okay,
CMS
cool.
Law
I
Firm.
will pass it. I will get that, and then I will send it off to anybody. So I'm going to go ahead and
Cool.
stop the recording. Thank you. Thank you. Here, and I'll